Welcome back to Historical American Girl Read-Alouds. Today we're in a very special location to read the final section of Meet Kaya. The last section of the book is called Looking Back, or A Peek into the Past, and it tells us the true facts about life for Kaya at her time period as part of the Nimipu or Nez Perce people. And one of the things that it talks about is the winter house that her families lived in, which was called a longhouse. So here today, I am in front of a longhouse that is built so that people can see what life was like for the northeastern woodlands Indians, but it's very similar to the one that Kaya's family would have lived in. You can see how big it could have been. This one is meant to look like it's made out of wood, because they would have made theirs out of trees rather than the tule reeds that Kaya's people made their longhouses out of, but it's the same shape and structure. You can see that it's called a longhouse because it's very long. This particular longhouse is meant to show what the Potawatomi Indians would have lived in, but I wanted you to be able to see how big it could have been. Some were even longer, depending on how many people were going to stay in it for the winter. But this shows you a little bit about what Kaya's home would have looked like. We are reading the end of Meet Kaya. This is the section of the book that's called Looking Back, or A Peek into the Past, that gives us some facts about what life was like for Kaya in 1764. For countless generations, grandparents have told children like Kaya stories for fun and for education. Through stories about a character named Coyote, as well as other animals, Nimipu children learned about the world around them, how to behave and how not to behave, and the traditions and history of their people. Elders told children the following story to explain how Nimipu believe they and other people came to be. According to the legend, long before there were any humans on the earth, the animals could talk, and they acted like people. One day, a greedy monster came along and started eating everything in its path. After a while, Coyote decided the time had come to stop the monster. He hid a bone knife in his mouth and tricked the monster into swallowing him. Once inside, he built a huge fire in the monster's stomach. Then he used his knife to cut out the monster's heart. The monster died, and all the animals he had swallowed escaped. Coyote cut the monster into pieces and flung them to the four winds. Wherever a piece landed, a group of humans was born. Each group had its own strengths and characteristics. After all the pieces of the monster had been scattered, Fox pointed out that Coyote had not put any humans in the beautiful spot where he and Coyote were standing. So, Coyote sprinkled some blood from the monster's heart onto the ground. From the monster's lifeblood sprang the last group of humans, Nimipu, which means the people. In fact, many of the Native American tribes that lived in the United States, their tribal names actually mean the people. In the picture you see a coyote. Coyote is an important character in hundreds of legends. And in the other picture it says, near Kamaya, Idaho, you can visit the Heart of the Monster landmark. Today, Nimipu are known as the Nez Perce, which is French for pierced nose. Early white explorers, including French fur trappers, mistakenly believed that all Nez Perce wore shells through their noses and gave them that name. In Kaya's time, Nez Perce people lived in the forested mountains, grassy hills and prairies, and steep canyons of present-day Idaho, Washington, and Oregon. They visited married, and occasionally fought with their many neighbors, including Coeur d'Alenes and Spokanes to the northeast, Palousas, Umatillas, Yakimas, and Cayusas to the west and northwest, and the Shoshones to the south. At the picture at the top, it shows you the land that they are talking about in that kind of orangish brownish color. That's where the Nez Perce lived. At the bottom of the page, it shows you a salmon. It says salmon and other fish made up a large part of the Nez Perce's diet. Some salmon were as big as a small child. Nez Perces traveled with the seasons throughout this vast territory to gather food and to hunt and fish. They traveled outside of their homeland as well. In the spring and summer, they sometimes went all the way west to the Columbia River Gorge to fish and trade, or east into the Great Plains to hunt buffalo. While traveling, Nez Perces set up temporary camps of small teepees covered with lightweight mats woven from tule reeds. Then every fall, the people settled back into their permanent winter villages in warm valleys along rivers and streams. The main winter village building was a longhouse covered with tule mats. Longhouses could be more than 100 feet long and house more than 20 families. Several extended families, parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, lived together in each longhouse, which is why I brought you to the longhouse today. Nez Perce children spent much of their time with grandparents and with siblings and cousins, all of whom they thought of as brothers and sisters. In the picture there, it says women gathered the tule reeds, which they dried and then wove into mats to cover their lodgings. And you can see how the mats looked in the picture there. A little bit different than the texture of our longhouse here, which looks like it was more from wood than the mats. Boys and girls were taught to behave respectfully and responsibly, but when one child disobeyed or misbehaved, the entire group might be switched by an elder called the whip man or whip woman. The children learned, as Kaya did, that what one person does affects the safety and well-being of everyone. Nez Perces called their creator Hun Ya Wat. They believed that everything he created, the earth, the sky, the seas and rivers, and all the creatures in nature, had spirits and special powers. Guardian spirits, called Wayakins, gave these special powers to humans through visions and helped them throughout their lives. Some Nez Perces also had visions that their way of life would one day change, and they were right. The first sign of change was the horse. Spanish explorers brought horses to the Americas in the 1500s. 200 years later, the Nez Perces traded for their first horses, perhaps with the Shoshone Indians to the south. Nez Perces quickly became excellent horsemen and horsewomen. They knew how to breed the animals to produce stronger and swifter horses. Nez Perces could travel farther and faster on horseback. As they met and traded with new people, they learned the ways of doing things. They learned new ways of doing things. Goods, such as beads and blankets from Europe, began to trickle to the Nez Perces before they ever saw a white person. And so did something deadlier. Diseases brought to America by whites wiped out entire Indian villages. Thousands of Indians, like Kaya's grandmother Allah, sickened from diseases like smallpox, and many died. Most Nez Perces saw their first white people in the fall of 1805, when Kaya would have been 50 years old. That's when the men of the Lewis and Clark expedition stumbled out of the Bitterroot Mountains and into a Nez Perce camp. The explorers were starving and freezing, and the Nez Perces befriended them, took care of them, and helped them resume their journey. In later years, white missionaries and settlers came to Nez Perce country and were treated kindly too. In the pictures on these pages, it says, small groups of women rode for days to gather food for their families and village. Horses made this important job faster and easier. And among the Nez Perce's herds were spotted horses, which are known today as Appaloosas. So the first interactions with white people and the Nez Perce tribe were very friendly. Despite the friendliness Nez Perces showed to whites, the United States government took away most of the Nez Perce's homeland in the mid-1800s so that white pioneers could settle on it. The government set aside a small tract of land in Idaho for all Nez Perce people to live on. It was called the Nez Perce Reservation. The U.S. government tried to force Indians on reservations to assimilate, to give up their traditional ways and live like white people. Children were put into missionary schools to learn English and were punished if they spoke their own language. The reservation land was divided up into small parcels and given to individual Indians instead of being shared by all. The government expected Indians to make a living by farming instead of hunting and gathering their food. Today, Nez Perce Indians still live on reservations in Idaho, Washington, Oregon, and Canada, and in other places within their traditional homeland. In the picture at the bottom, you can see the yellow shows the original Nez Perce homeland, and then the kind of dark greenish color is where the Nez Perce Reservation is today, as well as where the tribes of the Umatilla, Colville, and Piegan tribes are. At the top it says, Lewis and Clark kept detailed notes of all they saw on their long journey, including their first glimpse of a Nez Perce camp. When you study about the history of the United States in school, you'll definitely hear more about Lewis and Clark. So remember, it was Kaya's people whom they saw and who helped them out. Others live throughout the country and around the world. Nez Perce children, like children everywhere, attend school, participate in sports, and play computer games. But many also learn the Nez Perce language, dance in powwows, and play traditional Indian games. The Nez Perce people look back on their history with pride, and they look toward their future with confidence. The picture at the top says, on reservations in the mid-1800s, Nez Perces began to give up their buckskin clothing and wear cotton and wool, just like white people. But at the bottom it says, Nez Perce children today embrace both cultures, modern and traditional. That's the end of Meet Kaya. The glossary with a pronunciation of some of the Nez Perce words will be shown here as well. And that's it for Meet Kaya. Hope you join us for our next book.